He who restrains his organs of actions, but continues in his mind to brood over the objects of sense, whose nature is deluded, is said to be a hypocrite, a man of false conduct. This is very clear. Shri Krishna is trying to say that when it comes to actions, it is not important what the senses and the body are doing, but it is important in actions what is going on inside the mind. If the mind is steady, but the senses are enjoying the sense objects, then this is not a problem. It's fine. However, if your senses organs are doing nothing, and your mind is thinking about the objects of sense, then this is detrimental to you. You should not be acting in the mind, otherwise this is going to be hypocritical. If you want to understand it by way of a simple example, then imagine if someone is driving a car, the driver has one foot on the accelerator and one foot also on the brake. He's doing both the accelerator and the brake at the same time. The foot on the brake is like controlling his sense organs, and the foot on the accelerator is like him having continuous thoughts of the sense objects in his mind. Not engaging the sense organs in action, yet worrying about the sense objects in one's mind is hypocrisy. This is what Shri Krishna is saying. The word is used here, mithyachara, which means a hypocrite, hypocrisy. A thinker has given another example of this. There was a fire inside a man's house. Because of this, he padlocked the front door and he sat outside the house. The front door was strongly padlocked, so no fire could come outside. But it so happened that the whole house burnt down in a fire, including the front door with a padlock, which fell down on his head. This is exactly what happens to a hypocrite. The senses are the door, and even if one has padlocked the door, then regardless of this, sooner or later, the fire that represents the thoughts in the mind will come and burn down both the door and the padlock. It's going to come. Shri Krishna already said in the second verse that if a mind, in the second chapter, that if the mind has a wish, then in that wish will sooner or later be transmuted into the body and the senses. Guruji often thinks that if people such as Freud would have read this verse, then they would perhaps not been against religion, because Freud had the thought that religion suppresses people. One of Freud's biggest theories was that the more you suppress the mind, then the more those suppressed thoughts will come out. And the religions in front of him at the time were all religions of suppression. Albert Schweitzer has said that all the religions of the world are life negative. And you know what? He's true to a great extent. But if you look at the majority of religions in the world, then they're very much against life. They are religions of suppression. We need at least 2 meals a day to eat, or 3. A person that doesn't eat is called religious. This is suppression, because hunger is a natural phenomenon. When one has a body, then he'll get hungry. But a person that starves himself is called religious. We live in a house because people in the house are protected from the sun's strong rays and from bad weather. A person that leaves at home is called religious. We go out to earn money so we can fulfill our needs and get possessions. A person that doesn't touch possessions is called religious. We have feelings and attachments to members of our families. A person who breaks those relations and attachments is called a person that's very religious. The majority of religions are life negative. Why did Karl Marx become anti-religious? Marx said that religion is like opium for the people. And you know what? This was not Marx's fault. It was the fault of religions that were in front of him at the time, which had this effect on the people that were living around him at the time. What if these people had read the words of Shri Krishna? What if these people had understood Shri Krishna? What if they had read the Gita? There is no religion as balanced as the Gita in the world. There is no need to run away from life. There is no need for suppression. There was a katha, a discourse in the region of Saurashtra in India, and after that, Guruji went to the town of Junagadh to climb the Mount Girnar. As he was walking towards Girnar, there was a cave of great saints, and Guruji had the wish that if he had this discussion with a great saint, then it will make him happy. And Guruji was very curious to meet these people. There was a saint sitting outside one of these caves with a group of about 20 people listening to him. The saint was giving a discourse, and he was talking in Hindi. From his accent, Guruji could tell that he was Gujarati, but he was trying to speak in Hindi, because if you want to become big in spirituality in India, you have to learn to speak Hindi. This man was saying, I have no relations with my family. There is no one of mine. I have left everyone. I never get hungry. I never get thirsty. I have become completely separated from life. If someone cuts my mother into pieces, then I will not feel a thing. As soon as he said that last line, Guruji got up thinking, this is a frightening person. How could one not feel a thing if his mother is cut into pieces in front of him? We common people, we go past a market and feel sad if a fish is cut into pieces. Now how could not one get sad if his mother's cut into pieces? This is impossible. If this is the Guruji says that if this is called being religious, he doesn't want to be religious. This is suppression, and Freud was totally against suppression. Shri Krishna has said something very nice in this verse. Both Shri Krishna and Freud say that if one suppresses the sense organs but continues in the mind to brood over the objects of sense, then the thoughts of the mind will eventually be transmuted into the senses, whatever happens. We will all experience this. If one is forced to fast on Ekadas, which was on Sunday, last one, and has not had anything to eat for the whole day, and he's continuing to think about food, then that night, the same person in his dreams will go to the best 5-star restaurant and have a 3-course meal. This is because the mind is so creative. You may not got the food, given the food inside the body, and you may not have put the food inside your mouth, your tongue may have not had the food, but your mind will still create the food. And this is what Shri Krishna calls hypocrisy. Why does this hypocrisy come? The root cause of this is because there is no harmony between the mind and the senses. The senses are going in one direction and the mind is going in the other direction. The work that the senses are given and what the senses are told to do are not in line with what the mind thinks. This is how hypocrisy arises, and we have to bring them in line. The desires and wishes do not arise in the sense organs, but they arise in the mind. The messages reach the sense organs from the mind. The senses, Sanskrit language has a very good description of desires. It says, manasi janmana, meaning those that are born of the mind. Therefore, it's not that they are born from the senses, but that they are born from the mind. Any operation you wish to do should not be with the sense organs, but with your mind. But people forget this. Shri Krishna has used a very good word that we mentioned just now, mityachar, on the first word of the last line for hypocrite, mityachar. This can be split into mitya and char. This arises when one is not concerned with what is in the mind, but with what one shows on the outside. Such a person is a hypocrite. A person that is really in control first makes his mind understand. He gives his mind training. When this mind is trained, then the senses automatically follow. A hypocrite is not interested in training his mind or in inner transformation. He's just interested in what he shows on the outside. The result of this shortcut is that the person may seem restrained on the outside, but who knows what is going on in the mind? And this is hypocrisy. It is the mind that is important. Just observe society. With the majority of us, is not the religiousness, the fasting, penances, self-restraint, devotion that we all do, hypocrisy? How many people can put their hands on their hearts and say that the penances or religious activities they do are complete, true, and are done with full faith in the mind? How many people can say that what they do is not hypocrisy and not suppression? Every day, when we are sitting by God and doing our prayer beads, how much are our minds involved in the mantras? You already told the sense organs what to do. For example, the finger holds the prayer beads, the tongue is told to chant the mantra, but is the mantra in the mind? Mananat prayate iti mantra is the definition of a mantra in Sanskrit. A mantra is something that protects one through the mind. A mantra is something that protects one through the mind. There can be no mantra without the mind, and without concentration of the mind, the mantra loses its effect. We'll explain in chapter 6 when we talk about meditation and nam jap. Concentration is one of the big 3 things to remember when you're chanting a mantra. Concentration, there can be no mantra without the mind, and without concentration of the mind, the mantra loses its effect. The very definition of a mantra says it's something which happens through the mind, and humans have become hypocrites. Do not just stop at this stage of religious activities and penances. Develop yourselves further and control your minds. We make our lives with our thoughts. If we give a donation to someone, for example, food to 1,000 beggars, the hand did give food, but did the mind give food? The food left our hands, but did it leave our minds? No. On the contrary, the more the hands give food, then the more the mind holds back the food. This is the name of hypocrisy, and therefore this donation has no effect on our lives. We can look at it in so many different ways. If one gives £1 million in donations in the hands have given money, but he hasn't given. But has that person given the donations with the mind? No. The donations were held back in the mind. The money will never leave you throughout your life. You will always remember that you donated the money. You kept thinking that I donated £1 million, I donated £1 million. The hands have given the money, but the mind has held it back. Whenever there is a conflict between the mind and the senses, then the Gita calls this mityachar, hypocrisy. There was once a king, and he had the routine that every day until midday, he would just do prayers and service. During that time, he would not meet anyone. Once time, a true and knowledgeable saint came to meet the king. The guards told the saint that he could not go in. The saint asked why, and the guards said that it's because the king is doing his prayers, and it is a rule that the king does not meet anyone during his prayers. The saint said, no, the king is not praying, he is horse trading. The guards checked and told the saint that the king is really doing prayers because they saw. When the king came out, the saint told him that he had not been praying but horse trading. The king fell at the saint's feet and told him that he was right, because the king had been praying with the body, but in his mind he was horse trading. In the same way, when people today sit in front of God and do their prayers, then they've bought and sold so many shares in that time. Their prayer beads are turning in their hands, yet their minds are trading. And this is hypocrisy. This is mityachar. We will see how to become free from hypocrisy, but first we have to see exactly what hypocrisy is. At the moment, the diagnosis is going on, and the treatment is going to come shortly in the next few verses. We do differently. We try to become free from this hypocrisy. It's not as if we're not trying to be hypocrites, but these efforts stop somewhere. Why do these efforts stop? And what are these efforts? There are two types of efforts, broadly speaking, that are there to remove hypocrisy. The first, number one, is Hatha Yoga, and number two is Raja Yoga. And we have to understand these. In Hatha Yoga, one does yoga asanas, physical postures, and pranayam, which is more in line with the breathing. And the whole thing behind this is by making the body and the breath steady, you try to make the mind living inside the body steady. And this is the yoga that the whole world is doing when you see videos of Swami Ramdev and others. A healthy mind stays in a healthy body. This method makes the body steady first and then makes the mind steady. We do some asanas and the body gets steady, and swasta, meaning steady within itself. That is the first part, asanas. Then pranayam makes the unrhythmic breath fall into rhythm. That's what we were doing earlier in the meditation. It makes the unrhythmic breath fall into rhythm. The mind is as unrhythmic as the breath, and pranayam gives its rhythm to both the breath and the mind, because the mind and the breath are related. That's why we're trying to slow down the breath and slow down the thoughts in the mind. You see that the majority of people do not know how to breathe properly. This will seem especially new to people who are aged at least 40 or 50 watching these videos, but in reality, people do not know how to breathe properly. The majority of people breathe through the chest, and this is a mistake. When we breathe, then our chests go up and down. A little child knows how to breathe properly. This is because the little child has not learnt how to breathe, it just knows. It knows how to breathe naturally, because it has known how to do this since birth. If you observe a 2 or 4 month old baby, then you will see that its stomach goes up and down as it breathes. It takes deep breaths, and deep breathing is the correct way to breathe. A person gets older, then the breath doesn't even reach the stomach. only the chest goes up and down. Maybe if we've ran 400, 500 meters, then the chest will go up and down fast as they breathe. But we must understand that such a person is excited, and that's why they're breathing a lot. But what does it mean when someone breathes from the chest when they're not gone running? That means that there's still that excitement going on in that body. We are always excited, if not physically, then mentally. And because of this mental excitement, when we breathe, the chest goes up and down. The mind and the body are interrelated. When you wake up in the morning, try and slow down your breathing. You must have slow breathing and deep breathing. You will experience your mind getting peaceful automatically. And this is Hatha Yoga, making the mind and the body, making the body steady through asanas, and making the breath steady through pranayam, and therefore making the mind steady as a consequence of the two. The second way is Raja Yoga. This has the aim of making the mind free of even thoughts and even knowledge. This encourages you to make the mind steady and does not even consider the body. It says that as soon as the mind gets steady, then the breath will get steady in itself. In the same way, as I get steady, so too will the body get steady. Why does the body run? It's because of thoughts that come into the mind that makes the body run. The mind thinks that it's thirsty, and therefore the body goes after water to drink it. But if the thought of drinking water does not come in the mind, then the body will not go. Therefore, one must take the mind down the road of thoughtlessness. Actually, not thoughtlessness, thought-freeness. Because thoughtlessness is doing without thinking. Being thought-free is being free from your thoughts, being free from the bondage of your thoughts. After this, the body will slowly become steady itself. The reason is the same, but the two roads are different. Hatha Yoga goes up from below, because the mind is greater than the body. Indriyani pranu, Indriyani paramanava. On the other hand, Raja Yoga goes down from above. If a boss of a company gives the order, then the employees will do exactly as he says. Similarly, the mind is the boss. Yata Raja Tata Praja, meaning just like a king is, so are his people, as our scriptures say. The mind is the king, and the senses are the people. So just like the mind gives its order, so the senses will follow that order. Raja Yoga goes from the mind and then to the body. Therefore, one who wishes to become free from hypocrisy must control both the body and the mind and purify both. Both must be made steady. And if you just make one of them steady and not the other, it won't work. If the body is steady, then the mind is unsteady, then this will be hypocrisy. The aim of this is so that humans can perform actions but still be purified. And difficulties may arise in life, and a person will face those difficulties, but he will not fear them, and he will not run away from them, and this is the goal of such exercises. When do these come? The second question that's asked is, how does one become a hypocrite? The weakness of the soul becomes the strength of the senses. The less one knows about the soul and its power, then the more powerful the senses become. The senses make a person do what the senses want. The stronger your soul is already strong, but the stronger your understanding of the soul becomes, then the less your senses are in control. But if your soul is not strong enough, then the senses will be in control, and that's the reason for hypocrisy. Bertrand Russell, the philosopher, has given a very nice example about the mind and the senses. Because people just say to keep the senses quiet in order to quiet the mind. In reality, as soon as the mind gets quiet, then the senses also get quiet. In the example, there's a classroom and the teacher's about to come in. Before she does so, the monitor shouts out, "The teacher's coming, keep quiet." The pupils do not fall quiet when the teacher comes in, but when they hear the teacher's name. And this is what the mind is like. This hypocrisy is when the senses are suppressed in order to protect the mind. Let us now understand the difference between a hypocrite and a principled person. Earlier, in the first class in chapter 3, we looked at the difference between what is good and what is pleasurable. Now, we're going to look at the difference between these two. What a hypocrite and a principled person. At the root of hypocrisy is lack of discretion. It arises when one doesn't know what is right and what is wrong. When there is no such discrimination, then hypocrisy arises. At the root of a principled person is the discretion, this discrimination between right and wrong. Secondly, a hypocrite suppresses the sense organs of action with all his might. A principled person has understanding between the mind and the senses. There is no suppression. A hypocrite has an intense desire for the objects of the senses. The sense organs have not been able to enjoy the object, and the mind is demanding a lot. A principled person may enjoy sense objects, but he has experienced infinite bliss of the soul. Such a person may get happiness from sense objects, but he gets even more happiness from within his soul, and even more from his mind, and even more happiness than this from his soul. Shri Krishna refers to this person in the second chapter as Param Drashva Na Vartate. This person knows that the soul is greater than everything else on the outside. We spoke about this in Guruji's class at the end of chapter 2. A person may be holding a glass in his hands, and if someone told him not to hold it, then he may hold on to it because he's thinking it's valuable. But at the same time, or it's not a glass, something that's valuable like a diamond or something, but at the same time, he knows and experiences the magic and the bliss of the soul, which he knows gives him more pleasurable than that diamond in the outside. Next, a hypocrite's mind never stops running. A principled person always has a steady mind. A hypocrite likes to make a show of himself and wears a disguise. A principled person is genuine and does not wear a disguise. A hypocrite hides what he has and shows what he has not got. A principled person just shows what he has got. A hypocrite is always a coward. He has a cowardice because he has been defeated from within himself. This is the biggest cowardice, a human being being defeated within himself. A principled person is always brave and like a warrior. This is because he has won over himself. This is the very meaning of the word Mahavir. A person who defeats others is called a Vir, but a person who has won over himself is called Mahavir. Mahavir is a god, and he's also a Swami, and the definition of Swami is a boss. He's not the boss of someone else, because if he does this, then we're all very big Swamis. But Mahavir, Lord Mahavir of the Jain religion, was a Swami because he had nothing, yet he had control, full control over himself. And this is a very big thing to achieve. Jain means someone who is victorious, name Jain, given to people who are Jain, and this is someone who has won over himself. And this is what a principled person is like. Now, how does this hypocrisy goes away? There are three reasons why one is a hypocrite, and once you get these three things, then the hypocrisy goes away. The very first thing is that when there is suppression, then there is also hypocrisy there. If you want to be a principled person, then the suppression will not work. You need to have an understanding. The nature of the mind is such that if you try to suppress something, then it will slip out. When we do things like fasting, penances and devotion, it's order to train the mind. What is devotion? Shri Krishna, God says in the 12th chapter of the Gita what devotion is. Manyeva manasa ashva me buddhi vishaya, meaning give me your mind and give me your intellect. This doesn't mean a person in a white beard, give it to your soul, give it to the supreme energy. Give me your mind and give me your intellect. Therefore, devotion is there in order to train the mind. One must understand the thing that they are trying to train. In order to make the mind steady, one must understand it. If one tries to practice fasting or devotion without understanding the mind, then these things will never become successful. This is the very first quality of the mind. It can never be suppressed. A student went to a great saint and told the saint that he wants to learn meditation. The great saint told him that it's very easy. The saint told him just to get up in the morning, have a bath, light a lamp, sit down cross-legged, close your eyes, and try not to think about monkeys. The student tried practicing this from the second day, and after doing this for a week, he came back to the saint. The saint asked him whether or not he had achieved his goal. The student said that he had done exactly what the saint said. He had got up in the morning, he had bathed, he had lit a lamp, he had sat down cross-legged, he had closed his eyes, but all he could think about was monkeys jumping up and down. The student asked the saint why he asked him not to think about monkeys. The saint told him that this is the nature of the mind. Whatever the mind is told not to do, the mind will immediately run after that thing. We have all experienced this. Whenever you suppress something, then it's like pushing down a spring on the mind. And the mind will come up with double the number of thoughts about that thing, and it'll push straight up. Try and understand the mind. If you buy a camera for, let's say, £300 or £500, then you get a manual with that camera in a box. That book tells you how to operate the camera. It tells you where to put the batteries, or what to do, and how to adjust the lens. The person that buys the camera first studies the manual and then starts using the camera. Only then will the photos come out right and accurately. If after buying a £500 camera, we first try to understand it, then why do you not do so with the same complex mechanism that is your mind? That's why this class is called a manual for your mind. How can you use it without studying the manual of how to operate the mind? You must learn how to operate it, which nerves come in and out of it, which nerves go out, and we want to try and use it. All we do is try to use the mind without the manual. This cannot work. Try to understand the mind. Therefore, first, suppression does not work. Second, negativism will never work with the mind. There was a psychologist called Kuwe, Kuwe, who explained the law of reverse effect. This is very famous in the field of psychology. Has anyone heard of this? It's called the law of reverse effect. He gives a very nice example to demonstrate this. The more you say no to the mind, the more it runs after that thing. A cyclist is going in the morning, he's going on his bike, and there's a very wide side foot road which is going on, not in the UK because they're quite short, in Germany or somewhere like that, because they have big cycle paths. He's going in the morning, there's a very wide pavement he's going on. He sees a rock on the lane, on the cycle lane, about 100 meters in front of him. The cyclist gets hesitant because he's just recently learned how to cycle. He's scared that the cycle will collide with a rock. He keeps thinking, I do not want to collide with a stone. I do not want to collide with a stone. He keeps thinking with his mind. Kuwe says that there's a 90% chance that the cyclist will collide with a rock. If the cyclist had not seen the stone so early, then he would just conveniently turn his cycle in the right moment. The chances of him colliding would now have been 1 in 60. The narrow size of the wheel is such that there is only a small possibility that a small stone can collide with it on a very wide lane. But when the mind is negative and thinking about that rock, then it's very likely that the collision will take place. Very important. Think about this. This is exactly what the mind is like. A hypocrite keeps telling his mind, no, 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 and the mind keeps running after that thing. A principled person does not tell his mind what not to do, he tells his mind what to do. He thinks positively. The history of the world proves one thing. The schools of thoughts or the religions that have been negative have now been finished with the passage of times. The religions that have given a list of things not to do, such as not to lie, not to steal, not to look at women, not to eat this, they may have run for a few hundred years, and they may have become even famous, but with the passage of time, they've all been finished. But those religions that have shown what one should do, those religions have lasted. If a good mother sees a child playing on the balcony and climbing on the railing, then she would not yell at him and tell him to come off the balcony, because the child would do exactly the opposite out of curiosity, thinking that there is something there that she doesn't want him to see. That's why the child goes there. A good mother instead tells the child to do a puzzle for her. She will say that there are some blocks there and the child should build the blocks. She will point out where the drawing book and crayons are and tell him to draw those pictures. she will tell the child what to do. She will not tell the child what not to do, and this is how you should treat the mind. A principled person does not tell the mind what not to do, but tells it what to do. Thirdly, it's a characteristic of the mind that it only becomes steady on a thing that it considers important, and it does not become steady on something that it considers unimportant. Whatever you're trying to do, as long as the mind considers it important, then the mind will get steady. On the majority of occasions, when the mind does not get steady during prayers and fasts, it's because of this. We do not see things as important. We only do them because of fear, because we're told to do so, etc. We have the feeling that something bad will happen if we do not do it. You have to do these things with full faith and with full love, knowing that they are important. How otherwise can you do so? The mind will only get steady on something that it considers as important. Guruji often gives an example for this. When you're counting money of notes of £100 or £50, I don't know if it's £100 notes, £50, then does your mind not get steady? It becomes completely steady. At that time, the mind doesn't go anywhere. No matter how many disturbances there are, you won't notice them. You will not notice your TV being too loud or the car sounding their engines outside. Nothing else goes into your mind. Even if something comes, then you just separate it. You won't think about it. A grandfather is counting his notes, and a 5-year-old child comes into the room to speak to him. The grandfather will immediately tell the child, sit down, not talk, and he'll continue counting. But when that same grandfather is praying in front of God, and a 5-year-old child comes into the room, then he'll let him play in his lap, saying, he's just a form of God. This is exactly what happens. During the time when he was counting his notes, was that child not also a form of God? This is, the bottom line is one. For your mind, the God is not as important as those money notes. If God were important to you, then the mind would immediately get steady. Therefore, whatever good deeds you do, consider them important. This is how knowledge and action are beautifully combined together. I repeat that again. Whatever good deeds you do, consider them important. And that's how knowledge and action are beautifully combined together. Knowledge will tell you what is important, and through this, actions can take place without bondage, and the way of the knowledge and the way of actions are therefore interrelated. They are dependent upon each other. If this is not the case, then hypocrisy ensues. How can one have this experience of karma yoga? What does the Gita have to say about it? For this, we have the next 3 verses. They show how one can control the mind so this person can become great in life. Verse 7.